the last part. Okay, we're recording now. Thanks, Jenny. The last part, the last 30 minutes will be dedicated to questions. So as we speak and go over these slides and these topics, feel free to add questions. There is a question interface, a Zoom tab for that, and we will go over those questions when we complete the first part of the talk. So, and I see more people joining. So I think we're ready to get started officially. Cool. So thanks again, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And thanks for joining us. This talk that I'm going to give you now together with Josh is a talk I gave 2 weeks ago at Tableau conference in San Diego. So whoever by mistake was there and joined again, it's going to be the same thing. But if you couldn't be there, you couldn't join the talk, thanks for coming here and listening. And speaking of Tableau conference, I'm based in Tel Aviv. I'm calling now. It's 9 p.m. here, and to go to San Diego, I had to fly there for a few days. And I'm also a mother to three children. Not that young, but still, whenever I'm traveling, I need to make some arrangements for them, right? So my two younger boys, they went to stay with their grandparents when I was traveling, but my 16-year-old daughter, well, she insisted on staying home alone. Now, you see, here's the dilemma. On the one hand, we all understand how important it is to let your kids become independent and autonomous, right? We need to have them explore, because that's really how they become smart, creative, responsible. They need that level of freedom, right? But at the same time, she's 16 years old, wants to stay 5 days alone. Who knows what she's up to, right? Now, thank God, we've got the technology today, you see, to kind of, govern them remotely. But, as parents, we so often need to navigate this delicate balance between freedom and governance. Too much freedom might lead to chaos, right? But what about too much governance? They might never find out who they really are. Find their inner strengths. Well, we all agree you need to make some mistakes to learn your lessons in life. I think you understand where I'm heading with this by now. We can definitely apply this freedom versus governance dilemma to our daily data practices, or, even more precisely, Tableau or dbt, where, as you may guess, Tableau represents freedom, and dbt, which is the industry standard for data modeling within the data warehouse, represents governance. Now, time for formal introductions. My name is Sarah, as I said, and about 2 years ago, I co-founded Euno with one goal in mind: to help data teams strike the balance between the freedom to access and to explore and to analyze data and the governance of data models. A balance that becomes critical if you're looking to deploy AI and Gen AI or LLM-based tools for your analytics stack. And together with me, Josh, I'll let Josh introduce himself.
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. My name's Josh Vitello, and up until last year, I spent the previous almost 16 years in the Tableau business, the last 5 years of which I was focused on customer success. And to Sarah's point, we were really advocating for the democratization of an experience, enabling anyone who had curiosity and a business need to be able to ask and answer questions of data. And we kind of created a somewhat fanatical customer base along the way, and it was thrilling to be part of. But over time, as organizations started to really scale that experience, they started to really feel maybe some unintended consequences of this democratization experience. And as we started to deconstruct what the most successful customers were doing, governance became just a dominant conversation. It's one of the reasons this session at Tableau Conference this year was one of the most popular sponsor sessions of the year, because everyone's feeling it. And they're dealing with what I would characterize as a false choice between, do I lock things down? Do I create trust? Or do I enable participation? And the answer is not either or. If there's really negative consequences if you're picking one or the other, it's in the middle. And so that's what this conversation is about, and it's what Sarah is talking about, and it's one of the reasons I was so excited to partner with Sarah and the team here. So excited for any questions following. I'm here to participate as appropriate. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh. So when we end this first part, feel free to address questions to me or to Josh. We're here to answer anything that comes up. Now, I told you I co-founded Euno 2 years ago. In the past 2 years, I think I spoke with over 400 data leaders in various companies. And you know what? Guess what? They all share the same vision of having one central place to manage business logic and definitions. And a lot of the teams that adopted the technology of DBT are super excited about DBT, the technology that provides the tools and the technology to actually do that. It becomes, this vision becomes a reality with DBT. But at the same time, almost every data team I'm talking to is struggling with this. Now, let's try and figure out why. Every data team I'm talking to is in the process of building some central data model, one that holds the business logic in the data layer, outside the BI layer. No one wants to trap and to hold business logic in the BI layer anymore. And with DBT, this vision becomes a reality. But when I talk to data people, they express frustrations, and I want to share some of them with you here. So, some of the teams I'm talking to are frustrated because, and maybe this resonates with you, because, since they adopted DBT and started modeling in the data layer, analysts completely lost their freedom, and everything needs to go through the bottleneck of some central team of engineers. And this took away from the business the autonomy, the agility, and the speed to deliver data products. So that's one, I would say, family of companies. And the other is frustrated because they decided to give so much freedom to analysts, all the way to giving them the keys to DBT quite often, that they end up having a complete chaos and mess with their business logic, with tons of duplicates and conflicting definitions and inconsistencies and chains of views and so on. And you know what? There are teams that are frustrated because of both reasons at the same time. Now, you hear all these stories and all these problems. The next thing I did was trying and double click into this to try and figure out why this is happening, why all this frustration. And I believe the underlying reason is actually quite simple. The reason is that business logic changes all the time. It's continuously evolving. It's not a one-time migration project to centralize your data models. And these changes happen on the business side of the organization, not some back office of engineers, right? So business analysts need the freedom to create new business terms as they go. But then data teams need to go back and formalize and codify this into reusable data elements, right, to ensure consistency and efficiency in future use. But as data organizations grow, this practice just doesn't scale. And that's a quote I heard so often in those interviews. Sarah, you need to get it. You just cannot govern analysts. Now, let's think about it. When the operation scales and it's just too difficult to memorize everything that exists and what exists where, the fastest way to deliver a report in time is to craft your calculation in your own workbook, right? business questions keep coming, analysts need the freedom to deliver results on time. And that's when they end up finding their workarounds. They do it for a good reason, because no one wants to slow down the business. So we have the technology to build central data models and semantics in the data layer in dbt. But the reality is still a reality of inconsistencies, duplicates, and silos. A reality that makes AI deployment for analytics almost impossible. But before we speak about what can be done about this, and be sure we'll get to this, let's take a look at the history of data modeling to try and figure out how we got here in the first place. So first was Tableau, and business analysts love Tableau. I just returned from the Tableau conference. I mean, Tableau creates a lot of excitement within teams that use it, and teams can make incredible things with Tableau, right? It's the Beyonce of data visualization tools. And it actually opened the door for the self-serve analytics revolution. But at the same time, and unintentionally, it created a wild, wild west where analysts can run with no sheriff in sight. Metrics and calculations that are stored in Tableau are not easily version controlled, peer reviewed, or reused, which makes governance quite challenging. But then dbt came along, setting a new standard for data transformations and metrics managed right within your warehouse. You no longer need your business logic to be trapped in the BI layer anymore, and your business logic is centrally managed in a Git repo and can be used and reused by various data tools, different users, and different AI applications. It's aligned, it's consistent, it's version controlled, it's documented, and it can be optimized for performance. Now, with this transition from Tableau to dbt, the classic recipe seemed relatively straightforward. You should lay your foundations in dbt, you build your business logic in dbt, and then you use Tableau just to query dbt models and metrics. In other words, I mean, you build your data models in dbt and your visualizations in Tableau, the sweet spot that data teams want to go after, right? But even with the power to build an entire data model in dbt, I want to claim that the classic problems persist. And I've categorized these problems into what I call the 3 S's, right? Skill, speed, scale. So let's begin with skill. dbt is not just simple SQL. In order to participate in the evolution of data models in dbt, you have to adopt an engineering mindset and context and time frame. And these are things business analysts often lack, and for good reason. Their mission is to serve the business. Now, nevertheless, equipping analysts with the power of dbt is often accepted it starts with lots of excitement, right? You upskill your analysts to become engineers, and everyone is working on dbt together. But then you start getting requests from business stakeholders, and your analysts are caught up in engineering work, which leads me to problem number 2, which is speed. So business analysts are asked to analyze data to drive business decisions fast, but they cannot keep up, right? Because of the engineering workflows. Your data teams are also caught up with more and more tickets trying to keep everything consistent, and the business cannot wait. Now, that's when you start seeing those workarounds. Business stakeholders skipping the engineering workflows, the engineering process, and asking the veteran analyst to do something for them in Tableau, in SQL, or you know what, even in Excel, which ultimately leads me to problem number 3, scale. You see, as you scale and you want to handle these bottlenecks, you have to hire more and more engineers, and the cost goes to the sky. The migration project is over, and those analysts are needed to do what they were originally hired to do. what drives most value to the business, leveraging data to drive business insights. So they go back to using their tools, and whenever you let go, you end up with the same amounts of duplicates, inconsistencies, and silos you worked so hard to prevent. I think this is an interesting fact. Almost every large-scale company I'm talking to ends up shifting DBT away from the hands of analysts and back to the hands of engineers. So often the attempt to democratize data modeling results in, a massive centralization effort just to fix everything and start from scratch. Now, speaking of scale, let's not forget, what's left behind. Tableau is full of legacy logic that no one ever had the time to migrate to DBT. Those thousands of custom SQL statements and calculated fields, there is no way to tell when this logic was created and who is even using it. If, and engineers, they avoid cleaning it because it may be just too risky. So I like to call this the dark side of Tableau. So let's try to consolidate everything up until here. We can all agree that a complete data model in DBT is a significant step forward, but business logic doesn't bloom behind the scenes by data engineers. It's developed by business analysts on the front lines of the business as part of their day-to-day tasks within their preferred BI environments like Tableau. And the need to deliver reports fast is constantly hamstrung by the race to keep everyone aligned and everything in sync. Analysts move fast, business logic spreads, and silos and inconsistencies keep forming. In other words, the concept of first modeling things in DBT and then consuming them in Tableau actually fails. And what we really need is to give analysts the freedom to create logic as they go, right? So the first thing we actually need is end-to-end visibility, the power to understand the analyst side of the picture and exactly how it's mapped to the data layer, to DBT. With end-to-end visibility, the flow is actually reversed. Things get created in Tableau all the time, and later on shifted and modeled in DBT. We will model in DBT only what we want to reuse and govern. Now, you might say, this is all very nice, Sarah, being able to see what analysts are up to in Tableau and then building what's important in DBT. But how do you decide which logic and metrics should go there? What's in, what's out, based on what, right? We need to differentiate between things that are important and valuable and things that were just tests, experiments, exploratory work. And, dozens of new metrics and SQL statements and reports are created daily in various, business domains. And I'm probably not exaggerating when I argue that 90% of business logic created is eventually not used. We're working with lots of customers. Over 80% of refresh jobs in Tableau have actually zero utilization downstream. That's data statistics. That's a real world statistics. This is waste of money, but it's also a huge contribution to chaos, right? So the question is how we can tell the difference between what's valuable and what's garbage. And I want to claim that the secret ingredient is to look at utilization as the key indicator for business value. In other words, to stitch utilization with visibility, with lineage. Logic that is important is logic that is highly utilized. And the rest, you can get rid of it and declutter. You save money and you keep your environment clean. And cleaning and decluttering is not limited to Tableau logic. Same goes for DBT logic and data pipelines in general. If all the dashboards connected to a DBT model are not used, this DBT model can also be archived and cleaned from the model. I think at this stage, you can see where I'm getting with this. All these examples here are initiatives that data teams take to handle these problems. These problems are not news to any data team I'm speaking with. And what ties all these initiatives, cost optimizations, metric alignment, decluttering, discovery, and so on, is metadata. The ability to stitch together lineage with utilization, with code, with ownership, with semantics. All of this is metadata. But the reason why many of the governance initiatives and data management initiatives fail again and again and again, and everyone is so afraid of governance, is that often metadata is collected, but in practice, it's unusable. And the reason it's unusable is, I mean, these are like 5 reasons why it's not usable. Often it's surface only, so it captures only surface level info. It doesn't capture everything I mentioned before. Sometimes metadata is scattered across layers and technologies, so it's very difficult to stitch things together. You can have utilization in one system and lineage in a different place. A lot of the metadata lacks the context of dependencies. It's just, entries in a database that you can search and you can query. There is critical context that is lost in code and in description. So some of the metadata is unstructured. And finally, metadata is rigid. You cannot adapt it to how your organization actually works. So, I mean, that's where Euno comes in. And Euno is a metadata management platform. And what makes Euno different and unique is that we're transforming metadata into an actionable foundation for governance and AI. Let me try and explain that. I mean, with Euno, we build a foundation where freedom for analysts is part of the solution. It's not part of the problem. It's a governance that enables freedom. So to do that, we kind of double down on metadata. We collect metadata, we connect it, we enrich and we structure it. Everything needed to make it actionable. And we can break this process into 3 simple steps, like any process in the world: map, enrich, and activate. And let me try to walk you through this. So Euno automatically maps all your metadata and stitches utilization with lineage. This way you can understand, what analysts create in Tableau. The end-to-end column level lineage from the data layer to the BI layer, and also how every field, every measure, every report is used and by whom. We store all our metadata in a graph database, and this enables a lineage-based search using simple natural language like this example here. This is a unique example because, apart from just being based on natural language, I'm asking, find me all the dashboards that are highly used and only query DBT models upstream. That's the power of Euno. You can create this kind of metadata discovery. Euno also allows you to create new calculated properties to enrich metadata in a way that reflects exactly how your organization works. For example, you can define what's considered a certified dashboard. In this simple definition, it can change from organization to organization. A dashboard is certified if it only queries DBT models upstream. So you create a new live property that is now labeling every dashboard in your system. But if something changes in the lineage, this property in the dashboard will automatically be updated. Now, that's just a simple example. We can use this enrichment capability to articulate any rule or guardrail that is based on metadata calculations, even on code. Now, Euno allows you to propagate these rules to the consumption layer, to your BI and AI tools, so you can easily tell the difference in a transparent way between data products that are certified, data assets that are AI ready that you want to run your RAG against, and things that are only approved for internal use. Everything is automated, everything is transparent, everything is live, which brings me to how now you can activate this. So with Euno, metadata doesn't just sit there. It powers real impact. It drives governance automations and data ops workflows. Whether it's optimizing compute cost, establishing a source of truth for metrics, managing a migration, or building a data readiness program. For example, this is the type of insight you can get from Euno on the spot. On the spot, a few hours after installation. The amount of dollars spent on extracted data sources in Tableau that have no usage downstream. Think about it. Those extracts are scheduled to improve performance. They generate queries on your warehouse, but they might be connected to dashboards that no one opened in the past 60 days. That's usually, by the way, the amount of money that we see that is wasted on unused extracted data sources. Now, this insight can now trigger an automated workflow to archive or suspend such data sources. Another example, just a second. Sorry, another fantastic example here. You can see that the customer segments dashboard, these are the top used dashboards of the organization. And the second one, the customer segments dashboard, is highly used, but it's not connected to DBT. And using the definition before for certified, it's considered uncertified. You can track the number, like a KPI, the percentage of highly used dashboards that are certified, and aim to improve this metric. But you can also trigger workflows, Jira tickets, tasks for engineering to handle those top used dashboards that are uncertified and trigger the modeling activities needed to fix that. So that's how you can use Euno to prioritize your engineering power. One final example, going back to metrics and business logic. Let's say you want to establish a source of truth for metrics in the data layer, and you want to do it because you want to implement LLM tools and so on. Now, those ideas, those metrics are created by analysts in Tableau on the fly. We spoke about that. You can access in Euno the top used calculated metrics built in Tableau. You can identify all the potential conflicts and then add to the governed semantic layer just the correct definition, the one, after resolving all the conflicts with all the relevant owners. Then you can track how you establish and increase your governed semantic model as you go. I think at this stage, I'm going to pause. I think you're getting this by now, and we have time for questions if you want to explore more use cases. But the goal is clear. We're here to help organizations enjoy both the peace of mind of central governance and the freedom to rapidly iterate on new data products and AI applications. A governance that empowers, not one that restricts. And to sum up, before we move to questions, sorry, that's the last slide from Tableau. I'm not waiting in any data village room, but I'm going to be here for questions with Josh. So we can say, we covered many things here, from the twists and turns, of Tableau and DBT to the endless tension between freedom and governance. And I started from my children. When it comes to parenting, I'm still figuring it out. But when it comes to metadata, I'm your person. My team is here for you. If there's one thing I want everyone on this webinar to take away is, it's not a question of choice. It's not freedom or governance. It's always both. And I welcome you to ask questions, and we'll go over whatever we have and try to address them. I'll stop sharing now.
Yeah, we do have some questions on the chat, Sarah. So one of them is you mentioned the AI deployment. How does Euno help with AI-powered analytics deployment?
Okay, thanks, Jenny, and thanks for the question. Okay, AI. So, everyone's talking about AI now. Everyone is thinking about 2026 or even, 2025, and the experience of natural language-based tools for analytics, text to SQL, text to report, is a goal that every data leader has in mind, and that's the expectation of the executives. I think with every team I'm talking to. Now, I want to share with you a quote that Bob Muglia, I don't know if you know him, he was the ex-CEO of Snowflake. He's on our advisory board. I talk to him quite often. And he says, I like to quote him, I mean, if you want LLM-based tools for analytics to work, you have to build a governed semantic model, a governed data model. It's a mandatory requirement. If you have one, if you don't have one, it's not going to work. If you have one, it might work. Now, I guess for every data leader here and in general, it must work, right? We cannot take might as an option. And I want to share with you some of the reasons why establishing a semantic layer or trying to deploy AI tools for analytics might fail and how Euno helps. So first, I think we mentioned it, I mentioned it a few times here, business logic changes all the time. And analysts are creating things on the fly. And a typical data stack has tons of duplicates and inconsistencies, and an AI agent cannot know what they don't know, right? If it's not surfaced to them through data or through metadata, they cannot tell the difference between the correct definition of ARR and the, new attempt or test an analyst created in a workbook for ARR. So, and so this is why we need, to establish this governed semantic model. But to establish a governed semantic model, you need to be able to identify those candidates. You need to be able to clean all the things that are unused because they just contribute to chaos and they confuse those agents. So the decluttering workflows that keep your environment clean all the time are essential so that those agents are only exposed to things that are actually used, that are actually, creating business value. And then you can use Euno to identify your key measures and identify conflicts. And by resolving those conflicts and aligning definitions, you ensure your AI agents actually work with governed metrics. But finally, things will keep being created, dashboards, reports, applications, and so on. So you can use Euno to define what you call AI ready. You don't want to run your agents on just every table, every report, every analysis someone did. You want them to access AI ready data. And you can use those powerful enrichment and structuring and code analysis features of Euno to define what's AI ready. For example, only things that depend on DBT models from the gold schema, don't have buried logic in SQL statements in Tableau, don't have the PII tag, are well documented, etc., etc. So you can define the rules, and we will make sure they propagate from the data layer through all the steps and label all the data assets that are AI ready. So I hope this answered the questions. These are the main steps: getting rid of the clutter, aligning metrics, and certifying or qualifying data assets for AI. And when you are accomplishing that and you now plug your AI agents, Euno is kind of there. Euno had the connector to those agents to surface the metadata that is ready, the metadata that tells them what's ready for AI. Any more questions?
Yeah, another question. So as a data practitioner, how do I get business buy-in to implement such a tool, like governance tool like Euno?
Okay, good question. So if the implement, and actually it's a pretty important point because teams are used to having metadata catalogs, I mean, taking 6 months to implement. An evaluation, I mean, I'm talking to teams that evaluated 2 or 3 tools. It took a year or 2 years, and these are very tedious processes. So here's the good news. To install Euno takes an hour. We integrate with your API of the BI layer, with the query log, we read the dbt artifacts. It takes 1 hour. You just need the permissions. The security process is very fast. We're also launching a native app for Snowflake soon, which will even expedite the process even more. So you install within 1 hour, and then within 2 hours, you already have lineage and utilization stitched together and ready end to end from the sources all the way to the dashboards with everything in between on a column level. So that's how fast it is. Once lineage and utilization are stitched and mapped, we can start driving those insights. So we usually focus on 1, 2, 3 business cases that are the top ones for this organization. It can be decluttering, it can be optimizing cost, it can be building a source of truth for metrics, managing a migration, and so on. And we build those dashboards, those workflows to demonstrate value already within the 2-3 weeks of the evaluation, so that the decision, a yes, no decision, whether to move on or not, can be made not just based on promise, but based on real values that can be already quantified during the evaluation. Usually the cost saving component is experienced immediately, and then you can start exploring and estimating the cost avoidance component, which is very powerful.
Sarah, can I offer a complimentary response? And
Yes.
so, and maybe a bit more generic, but then I'll kind of loop back into where you were at. When I heard the question, sort of, I heard it as, what, any advice that you have that I can use to justify, defend investment in addressing some of our foundational problems that we believe are kind of upstream from some of the challenges we're having with, priority X. And so, the priority could be more from a BI perspective, like we're trying to drive, kind of data-driven culture, analytical access, and we're kind of running into a whole host of problems associated with that. And we subscribe to the position that Euno has, which is a lot of these problems are really far upstream. But problems that are far upstream to the business can sometimes feel very abstract. And so they can be very difficult to fund or to defend the funding. And one thing that we've seen at Tableau side is the data leaders who are really good at, and this is kind of where you were kind of finishing your point a little bit, is there's a whole variety of kind of reasons for why we should address these foundational issues, but you can really distill them into example A, example B, example C, and those are specific business problems, specific use cases with specific value in solving them. And so if you can really contextualize, sort of the effort and the initiative and the funding around those very tangible deliveries. And then some of them are very like long story arcs. It's going to take, months or years or whatever. And some of them are near-term deliveries and have balance in like near-term quantifiable delivery along with the more strategic long term. Those where I've seen kind of chief data officers being able to really sustain investment in their programs because the iterative deployment of or delivery of value wins buy-in over the long term. And so now the good news is, and then, is to your point, is has a technology that enables far faster delivery with far less effort than I think a lot of the solutions that people have been accustomed to in the past, which is brilliant.
Okay, we
Amazing.
have one more. Yeah, I
Yeah.
see one more question. I'll just give a quick answer and we can elaborate afterwards. I was reading that you could pull calculations out of Tableau and into DBT model. So I want to elaborate on that because we used to introduce this capability called shift left, and we kind of gained a lot of experience with that, with data teams. So, and this is why I showed you kind of a more, I would say, sophisticated and high level approach to shifting left. So shifting left is a concept. Things are created by analysts in Tableau fast because they want to deliver results fast. And then as things gain traction, become more mature, you want to shift them left to the data layer. You want to build them properly for future reuse, to be governed, to be documented, to be version controlled. What we realized, and it's true that when Euno started, we developed an automation for that. If you can build something and then click on a button and shift left, that's amazing. But this magic actually, and it resonates a lot with what I said before, in practice, no engineering team really wanted to just take this code as is and, build it, build the pipeline as it was built in the data layer, because that's an engineering practice. And when I interviewed all those, engineering team, they said, listen, to write it properly, we're able to do that. Coding is not the gap. With Copilots, as we're working today, coding is really the easy part. The hard part is to know what to start with, who built this, how it's used, what it's doing, what's the logic doing. So we figured there is more value there. So you can use Euno to understand what's the top, the top used pipelines that need to be shifted, but also to understand what are they actually calculating. You can have a conversation with a metric, with a table, with a data source, how it's calculated. Is it filtering for something? Is this actually taking into account that? We're analyzing the lineage, we're analyzing the code so that you can actually understand what was the analyst up for here, and then build it in the right place. We generate recommendations, but we're no longer doing this automatically because that's not really how data teams want to work based on our experience. And I'm happy to, revisit this. If anyone wants to have a deeper conversation about that, reach out to me, write to me on LinkedIn. Let's find some time to chat because I'm really interested in this kind of feedback. Okay. I think we have no more questions.
That's it.
All right. So thanks everyone for joining. As I said, like 10 minutes ago, one thing to take away from here is that governance shouldn't be scary. It shouldn't be either we are like biased and all in, all self-serve, data democratization, freedom for analysts, or we are, centralized, we are governed, we are in controlling everything. There are ways to combine those things. There are ways to deploy governance that is not just focused on stopping things from happening. Governance is not just about risk, compliance, and permissions. Governance is the ability to enable data democratization, to enable self-serve within defined guardrails and controls that, thanks to technology like Euno, a lot of it can be automated and not rely just on discipline and process and people following the rules. So that's my main takeaway here. Josh, anything you want to add before we finish?
It's just a massive unlock. And again, I feel like, we'd have these really big conversations around what are the different elements necessary to be really successful at scale with analytics. And there's a lot of, specific nuances around how deployments are managed, how workforces are educated, what kind of support kind of ecosystem you put together, and then you get to governance and it almost becomes a religious argument. And so just to kind of double down on the point that you're making here is solutions that can enable your organization to finesse sort of not or, but and when it comes to governance are going to be so valuable to organizations that are trying to be data-driven. And the good news is, I think as AI has captured all of our executive team's imagination, we're seeing so much more will to face this opportunity. And so it's about just getting started, and enables organizations to do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So thanks everyone for joining. We'll be sending the recording over email if you want to share, if you want to watch it again. And have an amazing rest of the day and good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.